Hi. Where are the other glasses? I'm Abby. I have a lot of records. And this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If deep dives aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. If the sunglasses are any indication, it's that time of year again. The annual Velvet Underground episode. There's only one more studio album, one VU, and one Redux on the table, so I really have to spread these bad boys out. And it's time for double album December year 2. So you'll be seeing me again this Friday, December 6th, instead of Monday the 9th, and this time I mean Friday instead of Monday. This double album December is no joke. I need all the time I can get to prepare. Once you see this lineup, you'll know exactly why I'm taking a Monday off. And with each passing day, it's looking more and more likely that my first review of 2025 will be Trout Mask Replica. I'll need to get that together before the holidays, so I'm taking literally the only break I can. Best to pump the brakes now before we get to Neon Meat Dreams of an Octofish and the wheels completely fall off. On to this week's album, in which the wheels famously fall off. This week's album is The Velvet Underground, White Light, White Heat. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what the next album is gonna be. I host polls, I make announcements, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written version of this review on my website, linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. Can I get the rest of the sticker off, you think? I'm not gonna try. That sticker's probably like 40 years old. Oh, are we gonna— oh my god! I got the sticker off! Awesome! This will no doubt be hell to color grade, but f*** it, we ball. So my copy is a repress, definitely from the UK, maybe from 1971. Somebody more familiar with the MGM disc labels will surely help us out in the comments. Discogs is no help, as I'm sure you're seeing right now. Not the album art you see on streaming services or any US pressing of White Light, White Heat. Let me tell you about the original cover art first, by Billy Name. It's a darkened image of Joe Spencer's skull and sword tattoo. So dark that I mistook this cover for being all black for years. It's a negative from one of VU patron Andy Warhol's films Bike Boy, which Joe was star of. According to Billy, this is how the cover came about. Quote, Lou came to me and said, Billy, I want you to do the cover. I said, Lou, you know, why don't I let you look through all my negative files and you can select something and we'll use that for the cover image. As for my cover, it's an abstracted photo of Little Green Army Men by Hamish Grimes. My back cover is probably the same as yours. It's a photo by Mario Annibali of the band at the Boston Tea Party, selected by Sterling Morrison. The Boston Tea Party is hallowed ground in VU history. It's where the famous amp tapes were taken. On White Light, White Heat, we have the classic lineup of The Velvet Underground. That's Lou Reed on lead vocals, guitar, piano, and Cantaloupe? Sterling Morrison on guitar, bass, backing vocals, and sound effects. John Cale on viola, bass, organ, lead vocals on The Gift, and co-lead with Lou on Lady Godiva's Operation, and Maureen Tucker on drums. White Light, White Heat was produced by Tom Wilson. Roll transition. Picture this. It's September of 1967. The Beatles are the biggest band in the world. They've just released Sgt. Pepper's that summer. England is the epicenter of pop music, and psych rock is king. Among England's hottest exports are the Jimi Hendrix Experience and Cream. Here in the States, the San Francisco scene is exploding. Jefferson Airplane, Country Joe and the Fish, a little-known Janis Joplin fronting Big Brother and the Holding Company. The Laurel Canyon scene is running high got two, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, the Mamas and the Papas. Then you have the Velvet Underground, releasing their debut album back in March. Though it elevated its guest singer's star, VU and Nico didn't sell a shit. Insert Brian Eno quote here. In the immediate aftermath of their first album, there are some big shakeups in the V universe. Beginning with Lou Reed throwing Nico out of the band. She kinda wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Warhol put her there so the Velvets would have some star power. She'll be fine. She gets picked up by Elektra Records, rest in peace. Releases two phenomenal albums, 3 if you count Desert Shore. I'm not a Desert Shore person myself, I'm more Marble Index. And she keeps working with John Cale. When he's not so fed up with her nonsense that he locks her out of the studio, the Velvets also consciously uncoupled from their #1 champion, Andy Warhol. If the Velvets wanted to go anywhere in their careers, they had to make a choice. Either keep Warhol and keep playing galleries and artsy-fartsy events run by Warhol, or try to break into the scene on their own. They went with the latter. Andy was not happy. If Andy's chest, Walk on the Wild Side, are any indication, they patched things up just fine. But as of right now, for the first time in their history, the Velvets are set adrift. Sterling said, quote, "Our lives were chaos. Things were insane, day in and day out. The people we knew, the excesses of all sorts. For a long time, we were living in various places, afraid of the police. At the height of my musical career, I had no permanent address." The Velvet's shifting sound reflects this. John Cale said, quote, "The first one had some gentility, some beauty. The second one was consciously anti-beauty. What helped the Velvets sound so ugly? Vox! The guys who made the Beatle amps. The MC5 played so loud they spewed blue smoke. The Velvets somehow landed a deal with Vox back in '66. They were gifted those precious Beatle amps used to the fullest extent on this record, and that was completely intentional, meant to mimic their live shows. Did they encounter that famous blue smoke? If John's account is to be believed, then yeah, probably. Quote, "We never quite realized that there were technical problems in turning everything past 9. Ugliness may have also come from some brewing animosity between the two creative figureheads of the band, Lou Reed and John Cale. It's hard to picture now in our current context. And God, I want to make a Metal Machine music episode. But once upon a time, Lou Reed was the poppier, more accessible writer, and John Cale was about the weird shit. That's not to say Lou shamed all avant-garde approaches, though. Hold on. I know what I must do for Lou Reed quotes. Yeah! Quote, "There were two sides of the coin for me. R&B, doo-wop, rockabilly, and then Ornette Coleman and Don Cherry, Archie Shepp, stuff like that. I used to run around the village following Ornette Coleman wherever he played." It's safe to say Lou and John were two big personalities, and they both thought they knew what was best. Creative differences caused plenty of friction. John was reportedly so incensed over the remixed I Heard Her Call My Name with Lou's guitar up front that he left the band for a while. According to John, White Light, White Heat's material, quote, "reflected the internal tensions as we ascended at each other's throats. Our shared intelligence could not offset the antagonism of differing musical notions." And yet, in that strange, tenuous Velvet Underground way, the turbulence, confusion, stagnation, and struggle was what glued them together. Sterling said, quote, "We were all pulling in the same direction. We may have been dragging each other off a cliff, but we were all definitely going in the same direction." White Light, White Heat was slammed together at breakneck speed, just a few days if John and Mo are to be believed, at Mayfair Studios in New York. It was chosen for its brand new 8-track technology, which America was the vanguard of at the time. Britain didn't fully catch on to 8-track until well into 1970. This is September of '67. Tom Wilson was once again lined up to produce. Sort of. This was the guy who allowed the mothers of invention to happen, so it's safe to say he had a very laissez-faire attitude towards producing. How laissez-faire? He was either drugged out or too busy womanizing to work, leaving engineer Gary Kellgren to do most of the producing. And by the sounds of it, Gary had his work cut out for him. Quote, We were working in a very small studio with no isolation, so it was all this noise just smashing into more noise. Like some material on VU and Nico, Lou wrote The Gift while he was still a student at Syracuse. It began as a goofy short story and ended with Lou's frenemy Frank Zappa, who just so happened to be working on We're Only in It for the Money at the same time the Velvets were working on White Light, White Heat, telling Lou he should stab a cantaloupe with a knife. And then came Andy Warhol's favorite Velvet Underground song. As he called it, the, quote, sucking on my ding-dong song. It's not so much about sucking on a ding-dong as it is the events surrounding the ding-dong sucking. This is gonna be a long day. It's about a group of drag queens who take a sailor home to have a drug-fueled orgy. Somebody shoots and kills the sailor, and nobody gives a shit until the cops kick the door down. It was inspired by the writing of Hubert Selby and by a bizarre interaction Lou and John had with a drag queen in Connecticut, of all places. As the story goes, the version we hear on the album was recorded in just one take, and it was so long, loud, and bizarre that Gary Kelgren cried uncle, walked out of the session, said something to the affect of, "You can't pay me enough to listen to this crap. I'm going to get coffee. Call me when you're done. F this shit, I'm out." Guess I'm Falling in Love was recorded as well. That was a lot more normal than Sister Ray. It didn't make the cut. The track listing of White Light, White Heat goes as follows. Got my eyes wide open. If this was on People Monday, got my eyes. Opening up the record, we have the title track, White Light, White Heat, followed by The Gift. Then Lady Godiva's Operation, and side 1 closes with Here She Comes Now. Opening up side 2, we have I Heard Her Call My Name, and closing side 2, we have the 17-minute epic Sister Ray. White Light, White Heat was released in January of 1968. And what a year 1968 would prove to be. I've covered the political violence and mass upheaval that occurred in the States in '68 ad nauseum on this channel. It eroded the optimism of an entire generation and popped the flower child bubble. In a way, '68 was the perfect year for White Light, White Heat to come into the world. Lou said, quote, "I don't think a lot of people realized at the time what they were playing with. That flower power thing eventually crumbled as a result of drug casualties and the fact that it was a nice idea, but not a very realistic one. What we, the Velvets, were talking about, though it seemed like a down, was just a realistic portrayal of certain kinds of things. People didn't yet have the perspective that the next couple years would bring." Hi, everyone! Abby from the future here, dropping in because I lost 10 minutes of footage. I had mic issues I didn't know about. It wound up being completely unusable. Like, completely crunched out in not a cool Sister Ray kind of way. But I refuse to have this episode maimed by 10 very important minutes of footage being lost, even if, as I sat down to film this bulb fucking exploded. You're gonna get some photos, you're gonna get some B-roll, you're gonna get some of me in a different black turtleneck, regrettably not velvet. We're gonna try the best we can to salvage this episode. Damn you, Mercury retrograde! White Light, White Heat didn't come out in the UK until May, despite the narrative that Verve let the Velvets flounder after the Banana album fiasco, which does partially come true around the Loaded era. They threw the Velvets to the wolves to save themselves. Verve did try to promote White Light, White Heat. They took out a full-page ad in Rolling Stone the week of April 27th, 1968, like 4 months after the album came out. Too little too late. Critical reception was mixed at best. The big publications either ignored it or wrote it off. NME dubbed it, quote, weirdo stuff. Rolling Stone ignored White Light, White Heat for the better part of 20 years. Though it wasn't for lack of trying. Lester Bangs submitted a piece on the record to Rolling Stone. The editors, Jan Wenner, passed on it. Les's Rolling Stone debut wouldn't come until Kick out the jams, mother! He did get to write the Rolling Stone review of Self-Titled, though. And he did get to write about White Light, White Heat some for Cream, and tangentially in Grail Marcus's Stranded anthology. Thank God for my Cream subscription for granting me access to their archives. Here's what Les had to say. Quote, White Light, White Heat was the album that firmly proved the Velvets to be much more than a Warhol phase, and established them for any one of our ears to listen as one of the most dynamically experimental groups in or out of rock. In or out of rock. I like that. Later, it, quote, will probably stand to future listeners looking back as one of the milestones on the road to tonal and rhythmic liberation, which is giving rock all the range and freedom of the new jazz. Love a fusion shout. Also, hello, no wave. That's tonal and rhythmic liberation if I've ever heard it. Less likened the excitement felt at listening to Sister Ray to the Yardbirds at their peak. Also very cool. Praises the gift as well. Overall, this wasn't just experimental for experimental's sake, as was the trapping of the worst of psych rock. There was intention behind White Light, White Heat's ugliness. Quote, it wasn't only the outer edge forays on side 2 which made White Light, White Heat a classic. Each of the other songs was a solidly individualistic entity of its own, as distinct from the songs around it as from the dim gropings so many other groups were into at the time. The LA Free Press also gave White Light, White Heat the time of day. Quote, the underground's music says, we're not kidding. It is sincere. He spotlights both long songs, The Gift and Sister Ray, same as Les, using a turn of phrase I absolutely appreciate. He likened Lou's abstracted writing to, quote, Bosch debacles. Overall, it was a thrilling experience for him. Quote, listening is like a visit to hell without getting burned. And we'd all like that, wouldn't we? After appearing at number 199 on the Billboard Top 200 for a whopping 2 weeks, White Light, White Heat swan dove off the charts, never to be seen again. As best put by David Frick for Rolling Stone, quote, no amount of studio voodoo will ever make White Light, White Heat suitable for AOR airplay. Side note, Rolling Stone Online has this review titled all wrong. It's actually David reviewing the full discography remaster that came with VU's release in '85. If anyone with this issue of Rolling Stone can give us the actual title, that would be great. Just after this album's release, the band hopped back into the studio to record Temptation Inside Your Heart and Stephanie Says. Remember, they're trying to make some money now, not lose it, and thanks to their own edgy image and generally poor handlings on their business, Verve will be bleeding money in about a year. So they're not gonna get any help from their label. But this classic lineup of the Velvets wouldn't last much longer. Lou and John weren't just at odds over the music, it was about John's new lady, Betsy Johnson. Yes, that Betsy Johnson, the one who makes the purses at Marshall's. She married John in '68, they divorced in '71, John would go on to marry GTO Miss Cinderella, but that is a story for another episode. Lou didn't trust Betsy. He thought she was getting in his ear over where the band should be going. As it so happens, the Velvet's manager, Steve Sesnick, wanted John out of the group anyway. He just thought the stuff Lou was doing was better, and it should be Lou's band. So after another round at the Boston Tea Party in the fall, Lou calls a band meeting. Then was a no-show, leaving Sterling and Mo, the two people who had nothing to do with the decision to fire John. And this isn't the last time Lou would chicken out of something like this. When Lou himself left the band after their residency at Max's Kansas City a couple years later, he only had the guts to tell Mo, who wasn't even in the band at the time, she was on maternity leave. By September of '68, John Cale is out of the band. Don't worry about him though, he'll be just fine. He's producing for guys like the Stooges, recording his own material, and reuniting with Nico and Lou in the '70s. Immediately after John's departure, the Velvets are still playing this noisy, abrasive stuff live, including Sister Ray. See the amp tapes, mostly from March 15th, 1969 at the Boston Tea Party, but some versions floating around have recordings from as late as July and as early as December of '68. Wait. December of 1968. Velvet Underground, Boston Tea Party, December of '68. Why does that sound familiar? Hold on. Oh, you've gotta be fucking kidding! Okay, so the amp tapes on YouTube have recordings of I'm Gonna Move Right In and Foggy Notion from this joint Velvet's MC5 gig. The Velvets hated the Five. Those Detroit hooligans brought chaos wherever they went, and the artsy-fartsy New York highbrow VU were not about that mess. As the story goes, in Please Kill Me, an uncensored oral history of punk, Lou hops on the mic and tells everyone who came to see the MC5 to get the fuck out. And they did! By the time the Five took the stage, the place was just about cleared out. Oh, and by the way, did I mention it was Rob Tyner's birthday? Nothing I love more than rock and roll history intersecting. In the long run, the loss of John Cale, acquisition of a young player named Doug Yule, and theft of a lot of the band's gear completely changed their sound. Self-titled. The most popular after the Banana album. White Light, White Heat is remembered as the black sheep of the VU catalog, but don't count out its influence. The title track was among the Velvet's tunes David Bowie incorporated into his sets. And the Buzzcocks formed after Howard Devoto posted an ad looking for any musicians willing to play Sister Ray with him. It's ranked number 272 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list. Quote, drowning their songs in guitar fuzz and drone, the Velvet Underground captured the toe-clenching freakouts of their live shows with their second album, the most extreme disc in VU's extreme catalog. The blow your wig back highlight? Sister Ray. So, what do I think of White Light, White Heat? Going in, the Velvet Underground are one of my favorite groups of the 1960s. If you ask me, they're one of the most important groups to ever come out of America. Dan Epstein described White Light, White Heat as, quote, a needle-pinning assault. It's true. This is the least accessible VU album. Douglas Wolk for Pitchfork corroborates that, describing a, quote, relentless, screeching, thudding, scoffing assault on the pop sensibilities of its time. 6 songs with lyrics designed to horrify the bourgeoisie. Not that they'd have listened to the Velvet Underground in the first place. It's potent in quite a compact package. 6 songs across, 41 minutes? This feels way shorter. This thing flies by at breakneck speed, careening through fractured scenes of drugs, sex, death, and violence. The seedy underbelly the New York artist community was born and bred in, and the chaos Velvet Underground called home. Man, did these guys luck out by having Tom Wilson as producer again. His famously hands-off approach led to some of the most challenging, boundary-breaking, door-busting music to come out of the mid-60s. It also led to that terrible electric version of The Sounds of Silence, but that's neither here nor there. I wrote most of this video and did most of my listening in the middle of the night in pitch black. Correct choice. The title track is a perfect opener for this thing and might be the perfect Velvet Underground song. It shares its DNA with I'm Waiting for the Man, percussive piano which slams itself out, and an oddly pop sensibility. That pop sensibility is of course tarnished by lyrics about doing hard drugs, such is the Velvet Underground. Don't adjust your dials, folks. White Light, White Heat really is that crunchy. It's so fuzzed out, you can hardly tell what's what. The drums are reduced to battering radio static. The bass indiscernible from the guitars, indiscernible from the piano. You can tell there's a big groaning bass in there somewhere. It drives the song in an insidious way. It's like the original album art. There's an arm and a tattoo, but only visible at certain angles. The only things that stick out are Lou's nasally talk-sing sneer voice and the, again, oddly 1950s rock and roll backing vocals. White Light, White Heat. Over White Light, White Heat's all too short 2 minutes and change, there are these slips in the pop veneer. An out-of-place chord here, Lou drops off there. It builds tension which the last 30 seconds won't release. In suspended, cranked-up confusion, sustained dissonant chords and bashing primitive drums end fizzling out into feedback. The end of White Light, White Heat is subtle foreshadowing to the subtle foreshadowing, a taste of what's to come. The Gift is a classic tale of girl meets boy, girl goes back home, boy gets paranoid and mails himself to girl, girl's roommate takes sheet metal cutter to package boy has mailed himself in and fucking kills boy. Am I wrong in thinking of the bit where the girl mailed herself to Davy Jones? Considering absurdly hyper-specific lines like, the idea came to him on the Thursday before the Mummers Parade was scheduled to appear. He had just finished mowing and edging the Edelson's lawn for $1.50. And, I'm supposed to be taking these salt pills, but, she wrinkled her nose, they make me feel like throwing up. The Gift reads like a parody of those early to mid-60s teen tragedy melodrama songs. Like the Shangri-Las used to sing, "Don't run off with your boyfriend or your mom will die." It's funny that Lou Reed and Zappa were frenemies. They both took the piss out of teen culture the exact same way, and both so effectively. It's because they both knew it so well. Lou wrote pop songs pre-VU, while Zappa worked in advertising. Anyway, The Gift is a great laugh for those with a morbid sense of humor, and it's got a steeply underrated guitar solo behind it. There's this really cool groove behind John's Welsh accent. The screeching with reckless abandon doesn't compete with John. This was one of the few mixing decisions made on an album that mostly employed the FAFO method. Wait. Are we even sure that Waldo and Marcia dated in the first place? The only evidence of any relationship are 3 dog-eared letters, implying they're very old, and 2 very expensive long-distance phone calls. Otherwise, Marcia just seems annoyed with Waldo, calling him a schmuck. Being LGBT comes up a lot in both the Velvets and Lou's solo work. The Factory was a haven for LGBT+ creatives in New York in the 60s. Warhol had a number of trans superstars. Lou himself had a very complicated relationship with his sexuality. At some point in his teens, he endured electroshock therapy, which may or may not have been to cure his bisexuality. Much to think about. Lady Godiva's titular operation is either a botched lobotomy or gender reassignment surgery, depending on your interpretation, a decidedly darker, unromantic take on gender dysphoria.
Doctor removes his blade, agingly so from the brain.
John's viola is so supercharged you can hardly tell it's a viola. The riff is Neil Young's Cinnamon Girl meets Jimi Hendrix. It's one of the only distinctly 1968 things on White Light, White Heat, and it's one of the few times Mo ventures out of her comfort zone. She's still quiet and understated, but dare I hear a flourish in there? Since I started paying attention to her uber minimalistic drumming style, I hear it everywhere, especially Out of Time, gloriously flat, accidentally bass boosted sweetly is one of the great unintentionally funny moments on any rock record ever. Honorable mention to Lou's on I Heard Her Calling My Name, that made me spit out my tea. The totally bizarre vocal mix has the same energy as the goofy backing vocals on Femme Fatale, but this one was just Lou existing. He is clinging onto that melody for dear life. My buddy, my guy, the guitar is literally playing what you're supposed to be singing. Perhaps in spite of the sci-fi heartbeats and medical noises, that Lady Godiva's Operation melody gets stuck in my head. Here She Comes Now is the only true moment of solace on White Light, White Heat, and what a sweet moment it is. The Velvets had this tragically romantic side to them. Candy Says, New Age, I Found a Reason, Ocean. This. In this case, I mean the music is tragically romantic. Don't think I missed She's Made Out of Wood. The drums and jangly guitar are all birds, and again with Lou's weird ability to craft a melody. Even if he himself can't stick to the melody, he just sort of paints the sketch of it and allows the listener to fill it in themselves. It's really interesting. Of course, this sweet moment doesn't last long. You flip the record over and drop the needle on Here She Comes Now's chaotic part 2, I Heard Her Call My Name. Sterling and Lou really fling this one out, slashing at their strings. I'm reminded of the Stooges in the way they get into this song as soon as possible, wail all over the place, and Lou's hilarious delivery. Woo! It's a Little Richard song gone to hell. Critics used to say the Stooges couldn't play their instruments. Hell, even Dennis Thompson said the Stooges couldn't play their instruments. A number like I Heard Her Call My Name and this album's closer are testaments to these groups being able to play. It takes effort to wield noise without it sounding like crap, and sometimes it did sound like crap. You had to have the gusto to carry it off. Once again, the song bursts apart at the end in a frenzied screech. One last warning sign before we reach the point of no return. Or maybe it's the distress flare, so we don't crash our ship into Sister Ray. Sister Ray. Sister goddamn Ray. Would you believe me if I told you this was only the seed of the hellspawn that Sister Ray could become? The album version is a whopping 17 minutes, but it could go way longer and way weirder live. Sister Ray is the whole bestiary. Of course I love Sister Ray. Are you kidding? It's one take, 2 chords, and 17 minutes of white-knuckled madness. The closest the Velvets ever got to the fabled psychedelic freakout Desolation Row on hard drugs. Lester Bangs had this to say about VU fans. Quote, "None of these name-dropping assholes actually sit around listening to Sister Ray for fucking pleasure. Ever." Well, bless, you're right about Sister Ray being the ultimate endurance test for even the most devoted VU fans. But I don't think anyone sits around listening to Sister Ray for fucking pleasure, ever. You do it for the experience. The experience of the Velvets molding this solid riff and distressed organ into something completely unrecognizable. It's hard to imagine how they could even build this thing up from the beginning. They're already going full throttle out of the gate. How did they get a dinky little organ to be that loud? It's like a deranged circus. I always get worried when long haul songs start out with this much energy. It's bound to fizzle out by the end. But the Velvets transmute this energy perfectly. They ride every twist and turn on this rusty wheel, every time change like a seasoned jam band. It's the shapes they cut into this frenzied slab, like knives slashing through a velvet curtain. Though Mo isn't known for being groundbreaking, she holds her own amongst this madness. She's gotta be beating the shit out of her kit. Lou barks out the lyrics. I can practically hear the sweat and spit on the mic. He's choking the life out of couldn't hit it sideways as the riff chugs and loses its shape. I'm not entirely convinced that John didn't break the organ on this thing. He's mashing down on it so hard. By the halfway mark, it's not even playing notes. It's reduced to a sheet metal distress signal. Help! Now! Help! Now! As Lou Reed sings some variation of "Sucking on My Ding Dong," no less than 8 times. Then the extinction burst as the song is plunged straight into the ground. Sister Ray is the blood and guts of the summer of love. David Frick described VU's multiple personalities as the, quote, musical seesaw, pop or art rock. The Velvets are special because both sides of the seesaw laid the groundwork for new subgenres. I love Loaded, and Stephanie Says is my favorite VU song at the moment. Self-Titled is the ancestor to the indie pop movement of the late 2000s and early 2010s. VU too. That's the pop side of the group. VU and Nico might be proto-punk, but it aligns better with the birth of alt-rock. And then there's White Light, White Heat. White Light, White Heat runs... oh god, this is gonna be way too on the nose. It runs hot. Whatever uncut material goes into TNT, that's White Light, White Heat. It's a pressure cooker, a musical autoclave that kills organic life as soon as the chamber is shut. It's thick and heavy like smog. However compact the package, it's big in all ways. These are 6 songs of lean muscle, no fat. It's intimidating, but I'm drawn into it. I'm down to be tossed around a little by it. It's a birth of punk, first birth of noise rock, father to no wave, and grandfather to the most influential band to come out of New York after the Velvet Underground, Yannick Sooth, Sonic Youth. If I'd covered White Light, White Heat this time last year instead of Loaded, I don't think I'd have been ready for it. It really took me getting into Sonic Youth late last year to warm up to this noisier brand of the Velvets, which is odd, seeing as all of my favorite albums seem to descend into fiery balls of god fuck at some point. Thinking about what Lou said in the last chapter of this video about 1968, I'm reminded of something Kim Gordon said in Girl in a Band. Oh, I'm gonna need the glasses for her too, hold on. When people would ask Thurston or me why Sonic Youth's music was so dissonant, the answer was always the same. Our music was realistic and dynamic, because life was that way. The Velvet Underground were always willing to hold their lighters to the flammable extreme of life. They were either on one end of the spectrum or the other. They weren't polarizing, they were the polar. It was life or death. And that's just what being a working musician in the drug-addled New York underground in the late 60s was. You couldn't help but soak up a white light, white heat from all that eccentric, chaotic, exalted brilliance. Pitch black, white hot. You can't always judge a book by its cover, but with white light, white heat, I mean this in the best way. You absolutely can. My personal favorites are F*** It, the whole thing. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's White Light, White Heat. What do you think of this album? What do you think of the Velvet Underground? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet has to say, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11, except for the next. Remember, I'm taking my break. And starting this Friday, December 6th, Double Album December makes its return, so you will be seeing me for the rest of this year on Fridays at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye!